This coffee is so crazy. When I'm opening the bag, the whole room is smelling like peach. And the reason behind it, it's a so-called co-fermented coffee. So this is a coffee from Santa Mónica, Colombia, and it has been co-fermented with peaches. We are going to have a look at the process in detail, but what I'm going to show you in this video step by step is how you're roasting and how you're brewing co-fermented coffees. For the brewing part, I'm going to bring you a very special guest, so look forward to that. But now at the beginning, we will look a bit about what's happening in the green beans and what's happening in the roaster, so how you can roast co-fermented coffees, because I assume you probably have heard of them, maybe you have even tried some of those coffees, and they bring really a completely new sensory experience, a completely new taste profiles on the table that you most probably haven't had before. So maybe to explain you a little bit the basic behind it, what is actually processing. So as you maybe know, coffee is not really a bean, coffee is a seed, and coffee is then being grown in those coffee cherries. So it really looks like the cherries that we have maybe in our garden or that we know. So there is a seed inside and then some fruit flesh around it, sweet flesh. And what you're doing in processing is you're going to take those seeds out of the cherry and you're going to dry them to around 11% moisture content. So that's happening during processing, and you have different ways to do that. The most common ones are so-called washed and natural. In the washed processing, you're going to take away the flesh around the seed and then you're going to dry the seed without it. And in the natural, you're going to dry the seed with the flesh around, and then after the drying, you're taking away the flesh. And then meanwhile, there have been developed some in-between processes like honey processes, pulp natural, and then most recently, people have started to do some experimental fermentation then on those beans. You might have heard of things like anaerobic fermentation. What's happening there is that you take those cherries, you put them in tanks without air, and they're being anaerobic fermented for, let's say, 2 days or 3 days. Everybody's doing it a little bit differently. So that's then like the magic, or these are then the processes that are happening on the farms. So there's a lot of science behind it. People are doing it differently, and they always trying to do new things, adding maybe yeast or other things to this fermentation. And one thing that has been popping up recently and is also then being discussed quite controversially within the coffee scene is a so-called co-fermentation. And in co-fermentation, you are doing this anaerobic fermentation, and then you're adding other things to it. So in this case, for example, the coffee has been then processed in Santa Mónica, in this farm in Quindío, Colombia. It's 100% Castillo, and the family is doing a 48-hour anaerobic fermentation with it. And during the fermentation, they're putting in peaches. So really, they're taking peaches, cutting them, putting them in the fermentation. So then the coffee is taking a strong flavor from that. After that, then they're doing a classic wash processing. And then the coffee, when you're getting them, when you're opening them, but when you're also drinking the coffee roasted, it really has an incredibly strong flavor of peaches, a little bit of nectarines, vanilla, and they're really strong sweetness. And if you want to bring that out in roasting, you have to take some things into consideration. One thing is, during this processing, the structure of the beans is quite strongly affected. So it's quite different than, for example, from a standard washed coffee. A standard washed coffee has a really strong structure. It's quite dense. And then the more you're processing the coffee, the weaker this structure is. And this has to be considered when you're roasting the coffee. So some recommendation if you want to roast a co-fermented coffee. In general, I would always do a light roast, because in those light roasts you're really bringing out those particular flavor notes. It doesn't really make sense to roast it too dark. Of course, if you like in general a bit darker roasts, you still will have a strong taste. You will still taste the coffee in a darker roast, but the darker you're roasting, the more the roasty flavors or the roasty notes are then overlaying those flavor notes. Therefore, I would recommend to roast it a bit lighter. And I also would recommend to have a bit shorter development time ratios than to really bring out clarity that you get out of these beans. Because the taste profiles are so particular that I would really then reach for a strong clarity in the roast. And therefore, I usually take a bit shorter development time ratios, like for example, for this bean, on the Kaffelogic Nano or Link, I usually roast them with about 11% development time ratio. Maybe on a drum roaster like the Bullet, I go a little bit higher, like 14%, but not much higher than that. Then the roasting itself is usually a bit short. So I wouldn't do the roast too long, but there are two things that you really have to be careful with. One is preheating temperature. So I really wouldn't do a too high preheating temperature. I would go even a bit lower than with the natural coffee, maybe 5 or 10%. It depends a bit on your roaster, but go a bit lower on the preheating to avoid the risk of scorching, because those beans with those quite affected structure, they have a higher risk of scorching, and you absolutely want to prevent to not have any scorching or tipping in those beans, because that would then overlay those beautiful flavor notes that you have. So go a little bit lower in the preheating temperature, give it a little bit of time during the turning point, but then when it has been through the turning point, you can actually add a bit more heat and start the roast a little bit faster in order not to have a too long roast and not to run into the risk of baking then the coffee. But then there is another point, and this is first crack. So if you don't manage those beans in first crack, you are going to have the risk that they are going to be then super quick in the development time. So that they're then going to develop a lot of heat in the extrathermic phase. So I would really then take down the energy before you reach first crack in order to manage the beans during development time, and then in the development phase not overshoot them but manage them. And then, as I said, don't roast them too long, go for a lighter roast, cool them quickly, like always in roasting. And then one other recommendation I will give you is when it comes to resting of those beans. In my experience, very often those strongly fermented beans are taking a bit longer to rest, so they will be then even better if you give them maybe a couple of days more than you usually do for other beans. So these are general recommendations that you can then use for your roaster. If you have at home, for example, a Link roaster, Nucleus Link roaster, then you find an easy profile on it. You have an anaerobic wash profile that you can use. And for the Kaffelogic Nano, Sean from Kaffelogic was so kind to develop a profile for us, which we'll put on the website. So we're going to roast now this coffee. I'm going to take 120 grams of this co-fermented coffee. Put it in the machine. Now I'm going to choose the profile which is called Filter Peach. And differently than from the usual way I'm roasting with the Nano, usually I'm doing the roast level. In this case, I'm now setting up the machine so that I'm roasting based on the development time ratio. This means that when it comes to first crack, so not the first pops, but when the pops are being like regular, and you have a sequence of, let's say, for example, 3 pops, you're going to mark first crack on your machine, and then the machine is going to roast the coffee up to the defined development time ratio, which is 11% in my case. So I have the beans inside. I'm now going to choose 120 grams and starting the roast. So the roast is finished. It took 7 minutes and 12 seconds. And if you prefer to work with roast levels on the Kaffelogic Nano, it went up to roast level 2.3 for this profile, just for your information. Now I'm going to take it out. And this is our beautifully roasted, co-fermented Colombian coffee. And now I'm going to take our special guest and we are going to brew this coffee together so that you have a beautiful recipe that you can then use also at home. So now we're back here with Sierra. and this beautifully roasted coffee. We are going to brew it now, but before we do that, maybe Sierra, you want to quickly introduce yourself, who you are and what you're doing here.
Sure. Hi guys, I'm Sierra and I am the content manager and green buyer for Roast Rebels. So you might have seen me on the Instagram or on our reels. I'm also the 2026 Swiss Brewers Cup champion. So I will be competing at the World Brewers Cup in Brussels this June. And today we're going to be brewing a coffee that is so tasty and also something that is my favorite for the season coming up, which is summer. We're going to be using this peach co-fermented coffee in a flash drip cold brew. So I think that these coffees really shine in a cold application, which I love.
Yeah. So we are going to drink it now in a cold brew or prepare a cold brew recipe for that. But in general, I mean, these coffees, how would you drink them or how would you recommend to drink it? Is it more like a single origin or blended or, yeah?
I find that with these coffees, they tend to obviously have a very strong and very obvious flavor profile. So if you're new to specialty coffee, this is going to be perfect as an entry-level coffee for you. And I think that the uses of this coffee are very versatile as well. Another one of the fun ways that you can have to enjoy this coffee would be to enjoy it in a milky beverage. I find that, for example, if you add this to milk or you use it as a single origin espresso in milk, it can really remind me of like peach yogurt.
Yeah.
Or if there's a strawberry fermented one, it reminds me of strawberry milkshake. So all the flavors are very fun, very obvious, and really great for the warm weather as well. You can have it hot, you can have it cold.
Yeah.
So really, so many ways to enjoy this. In my personal opinion, I like blending this with other coffees. This already has a very strong flavor characteristic. So having it in a blend to balance out certain other attributes, such as to bring out more sweetness or to bring more body, can be really useful as well.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think especially for like espresso or so, where you have this high intensity. I mean, we did an espresso the day before, and we just put a couple of grams of this coffee in the coffee, and it still tasted so strongly about peaches. So,
Exactly.
it only needs a little bit, but of course you can give it a try however you like. But now we have this special recipe, and do you want to start? Talk a little bit about it, how you set it up, and then how you're going to brew it?
For sure. So we're going to be making a flash drip cold brew coffee. And what that means is traditionally when you prepare a cold brew coffee, you grind it coarse, you put it in cold or room temperature water, and you stick it in your fridge overnight. And then the next day, what comes out is something that is incredibly sweet, very mellow, not so high acidity because at those temperatures, acid compounds don't extract quite so much. So something that's very full-bodied and very sweet and very round. This is obviously very, very fun when you have a co-fermented coffee that has such strong attributes. So I would totally recommend you to try it out if you have time. What we're going to do today is something that is much quicker. So we are going to be grinding the coffee a little bit finer than you would if you were making a normal V60. We're using a V60 today. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be making a concentrate. So a slightly more concentrated coffee dripping through onto ice cubes. And what this does is that the ice cubes will end up diluting your overall brew, resulting in a very structured and also very flavorful cold drinking experience.
Oh, nice. So we are going to prepare the coffee. How much coffee? And you said grind it a little bit finer than usually for V60, right?
Yes. So I would probably say 1 to 2 notches finer on whatever grinder you are using. And then I would, for this recipe, be using 16 grams of coffee. You would be pouring up to 140 mils instead of 240 mils. But the resulting 100 grams is actually in the form of ice cubes to make up for that dilution factor.
Good. I can't wait anymore. So let's get it started.
Phew! All right, so we have our ice, we have our filter, we have our ground coffee. One thing I do want to say about really fresh coffee, so freshly roasted coffee, is that it can be really useful to let it degas for a while after grinding because the release of CO2 can sometimes impact flavor clarity. So you want to let that coffee breathe a little bit. So I've got my 16 grams, ground a couple notches finer. I'm going to use my nifty bloom tool, which we also have in the shop. Make sure to check it out. I'm going to distribute it a little bit, also just to increase that surface area and let the coffee breathe a little more. Nice.
Link right here.
And then we're going to go ahead and brew. So we're making a concentrate, like I said, and the recipe that I'm using for mine is 16 grams to 140 grams of water. So your pours are not going to be that big in the beginning. I'm actually dropping the number of pours that I have as well as the amount that I pour.
Yeah.
So I'm doing 30 to 60 to 90 to 120 and then up to 140. So the same number of pours, but not so much water in each pour.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you can see that the pour structure is the same as you would do if the recipe was hot.
And you're doing less in one pour because you want to have it concentrated, or because you want to give it time so that it doesn't heat the ice cubes too quickly?
More the former than the latter.
Yeah.
And you can obviously play around with the number of pours as well as the pour amounts.
Yeah.
So say you could pour more water, but less number of pours. As long as it works out to the same amount and you like the taste experience, then there's no harm done. So as you can see, the coffee is now dripping. The hot coffee is dripping onto the ice cubes. And what the ice cubes is doing is that is melting and diluting the brew to something that you would actually drink as well. So.
And then before drinking, you are waiting until it's completely diluted, or do you will still have some ice cubes in it?
You can drink it with the ice cubes in, and the idea is that flavor develops over time as the coffee mellows out and gets more diluted. So you get a changing flavor experience. Nice, and I am now up to my final pour, hitting 140 mils. Give it a little swirl, make sure everything is saturated. Et voila.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
That's really a summer drink.
Absolutely. And what I want to mention with the flash drip cold brew is that you're going to have brighter acidity. You're going to have much more fruit characteristics than you would have if you had used the traditional cold brew method. So this is going to taste like a fruit juice ice, which I'm very excited for.
So can you say it again? How many water, how many ice, how many coffee, how many pours?
Yes. So this is an adaptation of my normal 5-pour recipe, and you can go and check that out. Just Google 5-pour recipe V60 and you should be able to find some guidelines. But basically, instead of 16 grams of coffee to 240 grams of water, we are doing 16 grams to 140 grams of water with the other 100 grams in ice cube form. So it still works out to be the same. Here you go. Are you ready?
I'm so
You're excited?
ready.
Oh yeah, this is perfect for the summer as the weather gets warmer. So you're gonna have some ice cubes. And I will also have some.
I'm waiting for you. I cannot wait, but I'm going to wait.
Ching ching.
Thank you, Siriam.
No worries.
Oh, that's so good. So refreshing. I'm really curious, what do you think about co-fermented coffees? Because is it going to be the future? Is it something really niche? Is it going to happen that maybe like in 15 years our kids are coming and when they're eating a peach they're saying, oh, this really tastes like coffee? So what do you think is going to be the future of co-fermented coffee? Let me know in the comments.
So we hope you enjoyed this video from roasting to brewing a singular coffee, and that is our co-fermented washed peach Castillo. And if you're interested, please make sure to check it out in the link above. But this could be the future, guys. I think this could be a very exciting introduction, especially if you're new to specialty coffee. Make sure to check it out. Tell us what you think in the comments below and enjoy.
I hope this video was helpful for you. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. And if you're interested in any of these tools, the Kaffelogic Nano, the Bloom, or then the coffee itself, then head over to our website, roastrebels.com. Be quick when it comes to the coffee because we have only a limited lot of this, so it's going to be sold out quickly. And if you have any particular question on coffee, coffee roasting, brewing, then always come back to us. Sierra and me, we are always happy to help.
See you.
See you.